Well, hey there, freaks. This week's episode of Tales from the Crypt is brought to you by the Cash App. You already know the Cash App is the #1 finance app on the App Store. What you might not know is that you can also put Cash App in your wallet with the Cash Card. We've talked about this many times. The Boost program on the Cash Card is one of the best things out there right now. Save yourself some money, look cool, download the Cash App, get the Cash Card. It's the only debit card that offers instant rewards and comes packed with premium features not even a credit card can offer. Save up to 10% at Whole Foods, Chipotle, or Shake Shack, and more of your favorite spots. You get $1 off any coffee shop you go to when you swipe your Cash Card anywhere across the country. The Cash Card puts you in control of your money with extra in-app safety features that let you pause your card with a touch, leave your wallet in an Uber with your Cash Card in it. Don't want anybody swiping it at a bodega. Toggle it off in the app. Nobody will be able to move their money. Unlike a credit card, there are no fees ever, and a credit check isn't required to get one. We are not using the other apps anymore. I don't even know their names anymore. I forgot about them. So visit the App Store or Google Play Market to download the Cash App now and get your free Cash Card today. Enjoy this episode with Pierre Rochard, freaks.
Tales from the Crypt.
What is up, freaks? Welcome back to Tales from the Crypt. Power week of content. We're on day 7, 5 people in 7 days, and we're wrapping up this week with the person who helped me launch this podcast, at least this interview series. I want to reintroduce you, freaks, to Pierre Rochard. Pierre, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
Just mic rules. Got to talk to it a little bit closer. We're not in the Barstool studios. We were talking about this before we hit record. A lot has changed since our first interview about a year ago. We were at Barstool, number one. We had no idea what we were doing. I mean, at least I did from a podcast host perspective. You were gainfully employed. You're gainfully employed right now, but you were working for somebody else. Now you have your own business. You were childless at that point in time. You've had a child. Bitcoin Advisory has been started, and Bitcoin's chugging on, still producing blocks. How's this last year been for you?
Yeah, I don't think anything's changed. We're probably like at the same price.
I checked. We were actually we're a bit higher than we were the day we were about like $400 higher.
Wow, amazing.
It was at like $5,800 the day we recorded last year.
Yeah, it's going to be sad once the 12-month returns are negative. 'Cause right now they're still positive. But yeah, give it a few months, right? Yeah, a lot has changed, and I feel like though that a lot changes every month, not just every year.
Yeah,
that's kind of how it goes in Bitcoin.
It's been a year, but it feels like it's been a decade. I mean, we say that all the time, but
yep,
it truly is. A lot has happened. The debate has moved from the fork wars and scaling to, all right, we're experimenting with Lightning now, and more people are starting to talk about fungibility. Some people are creeping inflation conversations into the mix as well.
And inflation bugs.
Yes, inflation bugs too. Big inflation bugs, one in particular. Yeah, so it's been crazy. We're wrapping up this week of interviews with you because it's the 1-year anniversary. I got to thank you for being the first guest. You really helped launchpad Tales from the Crypt into the psyche of the masses.
Well, Tales from the Crypt helped launchpad Noted. I don't think that I would have ever started Noted if it wasn't for our interview.
Really?
I was like, man, that was fun. I want to have more like recorded conversations about Bitcoin.
Well, thank you for starting Noted, because it is. I don't tell many people this, but now the world's going to know. It's probably the only Bitcoin podcast I listen to, and Stefan's I'll listen to as well.
Yeah.
Just because I'm crunched for time, always editing mine, writing something,
right?
Recording, and Noted. As soon as I get the notification that Noted has dropped, I jumped to listen with bated breath. And I got to thank you. Give me a couple shout outs in recent episodes with John Newberry.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that we have a guest in common, I definitely want to give you a shout out because really I want to not have too much content overlap between our podcasts because I know that a lot of people are subscribed to both.
Yeah.
So I want to respect their time and not like retread old ground when I have a guest that you had on before.
Yeah, no, I think they're very complementary. Different styles. And one thing we have to do, we have to get Michael in the studio. We have to get all three of us in a room together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would also be fun to have Stefan Livera on as
That's
well.
true. Yeah.
We've got 4 seats here, and we could fill it with podcasters and Vortex as well. We recently had Vortex on Noted, and yeah, he was just dropping napalm bombs all over.
He was. Very excited to see the fruits of the planting that he's doing with his dev boot camp.
Yeah. It's a C# dev boot camp that he's doing with Nicolas Dorier that's kind of centered around BTC Pay server. And it's actually it's very complementary with what I'm doing on the Lightning side, and we can get into that at some point too.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, let's reminisce a little bit. What's the narrative has changed last time we spoke, recorded. Last time we recorded a podcast, we were gearing up for the run to 20K on the way up. Now we're hovering around 6,500 on the way down. Volatility is at an all-time low. We're close to all-time lows.
Yep.
It seems like markets are getting desperate. People are getting a little tired. A lot of fighting going on in crypto Twitter.
Yeah, in crypto Twitter and in private Slack channels as well.
That is right.
And on Telegram, I think we're seeing some people plausibly setting themselves up to rage quit. I want to be clear about what a rage quit is, because I think that there's some confusion about this on crypto Twitter.
Let's clear it up.
A rage quit is not when you're short-term bearish on the price, but long-term bullish on the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm.
To me, a rage quit is when you were long-term bullish on fundamentals and you have turned long-term bearish, and you think Bitcoin's going to zero or it's just never going to go back up at any point in the future. So that to me is like, that's when your psychology has reached complete capitulation, and you get an opinion piece in the New York Times blog like we had last cycle with Mike Hearn.
Yeah, January, February 2015 was probably right around the local bottom.
So I think that to get another local bottom, we've got to wait until someone legit rage quits.
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
It seems like the tides are stirring in the channels, in the social channels. A lot of people are getting antsy. Again, like time preference. People just can't take boring.
Is this what like fraternity hazing is like? You see like people capitulating one by one, and then only the strong survive. Not that I'm endorsing fraternity hazing. I was not in a fraternity, and
I wasn't.
It's a source of physical danger and should be illegal and is illegal. But we kind of have a similar process of like hazing participants in the markets by inflicting as much pain on them as possible. And really, it's like entirely psychology driven, because you have people who like panic bought the top, and one by one, like they have to come to the conclusion of like, you know what? I should sell now and I'll buy back, when it's at $3,000, and that means that I'll, double my money, which like will somehow make up for the losses from blah, blah, blah. Like they find ways to rationalize, whether it's on the buying side or on the selling side. The human mind is so frail and weak.
Right? It's only been 11 months since the top.
Yeah.
Not even a year. This is a multi-decade, multi-century, multi-generation phenomena. We're in the first inning still.
For sure. And this bear market feels different than the last one.
Why is that?
I'd have to look at the numbers, but it certainly feels like it is less full of hope on every bounce up, and a lot more people. I hear more chatter about, hey, this is going to be a long bear market than I did in 2014.
Yeah, I mean, our good friend Murad, he's our in-house bearish bull, and he thinks that we're going to have a very extended, prolonged bear market. I'm not sure how much I agree with him on that, but
yeah, I'm not sure as well. I think that one stat that I really want to see, and I haven't seen a solid number on it, is how many people are auto buying Bitcoins every 2 weeks? And like what dollar volume of inflows into the Bitcoin markets is that? And
I'm raising my hand right now. I'm still DCAing in.
Yeah.
I'll make bigger purchases every once in a while, but
Does Square Cash App have a auto buy feature? We should pitch that to them if they don't. I think that's a very important feature for Bitcoin's liquidity.
I think they might. I know they have auto buying or auto convert, like sending cash from your account to the app. I don't know if they have auto buying on Bitcoin yet. Let me check. Let me open up my Cash App, the only app we're using for buying Bitcoin these days.
No, that's why I brought them up. I wasn't going to mention their competitor that I know has an auto buy feature, but they'll go unnamed because, hey, they don't sponsor podcasts.
No, they don't. And it doesn't look like Square has or Cash App has an auto buy for Bitcoin yet. We'll have to put
Lobby.
that. Yeah, we'll have to put a ticket into Miles to see if we can get that added.
Yeah.
But this is actually a good segue into a piece you wrote about, or piece you dropped last week that I wrote about in Bent, basically describing the buyers of last resort and the hodlers of last resort in Bitcoin. You described 6 different types of buyers of last resort, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. And so basically my inspiration was from a podcast I did with Trace Mayer.
Mm-hmm.
And what Trace's phrase was hodlers of last resort.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that to be very, it's first of all, it's a provocative statement because you're reappropriating Fed culture, right? So in some circles, it's probably politically incorrect to do that. I think on Marty Ben's podcast, Tales from the Crypt, it's an okay subject.
We're okay to get a little. We don't stray down the PC path. We stray off that path. Yeah.
So the phrase that it is aping and imitating is lender of last resort, and a lender of last resort is necessary in a fiat fractional reserve banking system because you can otherwise get into a deflationary spiral when credit expansion is increasing and it's. The banking system is growing, the economy is growing, quote unquote. You have the creation of money when a bank lends out, like they, put cash in your bank account, and they find a way to offset it. Well, so they then have a liability, right, on their balance sheet as well, and the Federal Reserve makes them keep a certain reserve ratio, but basically, the whole idea is that lending new money creates new money. And the reverse process is true when people are paying off loans and no new loans are getting created, then essentially money is getting destroyed. And when money gets destroyed in that kind of process, then prices either stagnate or go down and you have deflation. And that actually arguably makes it harder to service your debts. And then you get into like a deflationary spiral where people end up defaulting on their debts and banks, default as well. And then they're insolvent and then they need to get taken over or they just collapse and destroy even more money. So anyway, this process is broken by a lender of last resort who steps into the market and says, you know what, I'm going to lend money if you've got good collateral and let's get this process of money creation going again.
Yeah. So that's something we're very abreast to in the traditional financial system, and that's basically what happened in 2008. The lender last resort came in. And
it's weird to me that there's like this stigma of like bailouts. Oh man, yeah, they bailed out Wall Street. It's like, well, yeah, that's like what they're there for. That's they're the lender of last resort. Like we knew about this for a while. Like, why is this shocking to people?
Right, and they injected $3.5 trillion into the economy, I believe.
Yeah.
Trillion with a T. The balance sheet at the time of the QE expansion, the inception of the QE expansion and TARP, I believe their balance sheet was like $850 billion.
Yeah. So with QE, what happens is that they, the federal government runs a massive deficit and issues billions of dollars worth of debt every year, and that's a deficit and. Every year the deficit gets added to this big pool that we call the national debt.
It's getting high.
Yeah, it's getting high. And that national debt is owned by investors, bond investors, who are trying to earn a rate of return or trying to protect their capital. And it's generally seen, because the U.S. government is like the world superpower, it's seen as the least risky lending you can do is to the federal government. But point being that the Fed with QE went into the bond market and purchased bonds from private and foreign investors alike, and was outbidding other buyers. And when they bought bonds, they created money, much like a commercial bank would make money when they lend out money.
Mm-hmm. And so in your paper, you did a great job of analogizing this type of system to Bitcoin and describing the different types of hodlers of last resort, which I think is important because there's very different types of investors and people that are buying at certain points in time. And I think you did a very good job of sort of drawing a broad landscape of the different types of buyers that help set a floor for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and really the main thing is that currently, if we look at what kind of system is Bitcoin from a monetary perspective, what we have in front of us today, and it may change in the future, but I'm just describing present reality, is that we have, first of all, a very sound money that has a very well understood rate of supply coming onto the market. And there's a lot of clarity around the monetary policy. Now, there's a lot of technology risk that kind of offsets that advantage. But at the financial system layer, we have a 100% reserve banking system. And so even participants like Coinbase at least purport to be 100% reserve. Maybe some have been hacked and they're insolvent and we don't know. But broadly speaking, like the system that's getting built with exchanges is 100% reserve. So in that kind of system, the new money gets created when people are mining, and there's real money being spent on mining. So it's not like this money's getting created out of thin air. I don't know that miners have that great of profit margins right now, so it's probably break even.
Very thin.
Yeah. Or very thin. So in that regard, I wouldn't even consider that seniorage. Like, people see that as seniorage. I don't, because you're basically earning a market rate of return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's important. It's an important concept to understand what mining in particular and why proof of stake might not be a good alternative.
That and like, for example, like Ripple spends $0 when they quote unquote mine their XRP.
Well, this is actually you're king of segues for me. You were in another Twitter, or I don't even know if the first thing we talked about was on Twitter debate. It was a paper you wrote, but you were in a Twitter debate with a multi-coiner talking about the Bitcoin's initial distribution, comparing it to Ethereum's, and whether or not one is more ethical than the other.
Yeah.
It's subjective.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me get to that. I wanted to just put a button on it in that the system I described with Bitcoin's coming onto the market for mining means that Bitcoin is not vulnerable to the same problem that I just described with fractional reserve banking. And so Bitcoin doesn't need a lender of last resort. Mm-hmm. There's barely even a credit market on top of Bitcoin. So like that would be, it's minuscule, and it's not like if the Bitcoin credit market collapsed, it's basically like people who borrowed Bitcoins to short sell it or something like that.
Okay.
And it wouldn't cause the price of Bitcoin to collapse. People argue that if like Tethers was fractional reserve, that would cause the price of Bitcoin to collapse. I don't know where they get that idea from. Like the mechanics of that don't make sense to me at all.
Why is that?
Because you have people who are holding Tethers who are out, X number of dollars. How is that related to Bitcoin at all?
Right.
I get that it's people who maybe they were active traders and that perhaps they would have been buyers of Bitcoin at some point in the future. But look, there's a lot of competition to buy Bitcoins today. Like I don't see them being the marginal price setter. Yeah,
no, I mean, I'm just sick of the Tether FUD. It just needs to go away. I mean, I think they're actually. I think what Hasu wrote, they might actually sneakily just be unwinding Tether
Look, I have no inside knowledge on it. But my troll opinion is that I want tethers. I want each unit of tethers to turn out to be worth $0, and I want it to just collapse immediately. And then, look, I'm pro Bitcoin. All right, I'm not pro tethers. I don't know why.
You're not pro fiat coins.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about Ethereum. Like, yeah, I do hope its price goes to 0 tomorrow. I want everyone to be punished. Anyone who didn't hold Bitcoins, I want them to be punished, whether it's tethers or EOS or XRP. So I don't see why people are so spun up about it.
Yeah. And does this stem from the initial distribution or the signage that these projects?
No. Well, I mean, with Tether specifically, I think it stems from the fact that people want to be effortlessly or frictionlessly trying to time the market of Bitcoin USD.
Yeah.
Right. And so they're trading in and out of tethers because one day they think that Bitcoin's going to go up tomorrow, and the next day they think it's going to go down. And like, I find short-term speculative behavior like that to be I frown upon it. Like and I have this bias because I have this bias in equity markets as well. Is that I don't think you should be timing the market. I think that like the way that you make money should be by creating goods and services and selling them on the market, not like trying to time capital markets.
Yeah, trying to
short term
bank on Bitcoin wholly. That's another thing. There's a lot of people out there who live solely off Bitcoin. I just want to like send out like a message of caution to these people who live solely on Bitcoin. Like it's very risky. I like the fact that I have a paying job that has a steady paycheck. So I think it's important to still make USD or your native currency while being a Bitcoiner.
I would caveat that with like the concept of a safe withdrawal rate in finance, where basically with like a portfolio of stocks and like it's, let's say the S&P 500, if you back tested it since I think like early 1900s, they did this, it's called the Trinity study. They basically determined that you could withdraw 4% per year and you would continue to have like the standard of living that you have with 4%. So like if it's $1 million, that's $40,000 a year that you could be taking out to live off of. Now that research was done with like equities market, which is a very different beast than Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did it again with Bitcoin, I think you would have some like very different results, and like who knows what percentage is a safe withdrawal rate. But with that caveat, like if you're Roger Ver and you're sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, the safe withdrawal rate is greater than 0%. Like it's going to be okay if you spend some Bitcoin on whatever the hell Roger Ver spends his Bitcoins on. It seems to be on Twitter sock puppets, but I won't stoop down to that level. I won't to speculate too long on that.
We only like to share facts here, Pierre. We can't have this fake news spread on.
Yeah, thanks for fact checking me, Marty. That's why I come on your show.
I don't know if you may have just spoken a fact though. I don't know for sure. You did speak a fact because Bitcoin.com was paying people to retweet shit back in the day. So
look, trust, don't verify.
That's
okay?
true.
That's all I say.
Yeah. That's don't trust verify. Yeah.
Got the sticker on my laptop.
It's a good one.
Thank you.
It's a lonely sticker.
Yeah, I got more stickers at the Lightning Hackathon. I just haven't gotten around to pasting them onto the back of my laptop. I also I have some anxiety about putting more stickers on my laptop because I've had laptop cases that I put a bunch of stickers on that I was very proud of, and then like the case like somehow broke or didn't fit my laptop because I changed laptops, and then I have to like leave those stickers behind. So I wish there was a way of traveling with your stickers from laptop to laptop of different screen sizes and different cases. Might be a startup idea.
That sounds like I think that would get funded pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I
don't know how you would even technically do that. That sounds like it would be pretty hard.
It might be impossible, but
yeah.
I'm not a big sticker guy. I raw dog it on the laptop.
I mean, it's also like these are beautiful pieces of engineering, and maybe don't defile them with your nonsense stickers.
With your propaganda.
Yeah, my propaganda.
Propaganda is important, especially in the bear market.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and I think that I try to think of propaganda that is, first of all, like has some semblance of truth to it. Like there's an objective third party, the reasonable person off the street, after hearing from different parties and like trying to gather some facts himself, would come to the conclusion that like Pierre has a plausible argument that he's making here, like not something that's absolutely ridiculous, because I do see like absolutely ridiculous propaganda out there, both like for Bitcoin, anti-Bitcoin, for altcoins or whatever.
What's the most ridiculous propaganda you're seeing these days?
Well, like an egregious one is the premise that Ripple is decentralized. I think that one's, first of all, it's like hysterical, but also that whole community is basically, and it's funny because Bitcoin critics are like, oh, Bitcoin maximalists are in a cult.
I like this cult. Big fan of the cult.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the cult, and it goes back to like the reasonable man off the street. Like, give me 9 hours with a jury, and then have them deliberate: is Pierre beyond any reasonable doubt inside a cult? Like, I think that would be an interesting trial to have, and I will represent myself as my own attorney in this trial, and then have a maybe you'd want to have somehow a sample of Ripple shills off of Twitter, and have them be like the other side.
Counter argument. The counter argument.
The counter argument, yeah, and then we can switch places, and then I think that a jury would at least have like, maybe not beyond any reasonable doubt, but they would definitely rank the probability of the XRP shill being in a cult higher than the one for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I would agree. If you're just randomly screaming at people on Twitter because they shit on Ripple, it might be a sign. If you're lashing out,
Yeah, there's that, and then they just have like bizarre notions of how does a money accrue value, and it accrues value from more people holding it. They think that it accrues value from press releases about pilot programs from Ripple that don't use XRP. Like, these people are on a different level of sophistication when it comes to the issue of money.
It's really funny to watch them try to de-alienate between Ripple and XRP, because there is no, we're being honest, there's no really separation.
Well, they also have like absurd memes. Their most absurd meme, I find, is that basically the killer use case for XRP is in facilitating Forex transactions, because it can be a neutral, like almost a reserve currency, what Paul Krugman called a vehicle currency in international trade. And so someone who has USD would buy XRP to send it to someone else who's like in the UK, who would then sell the XRP for the British pound. And like that narrative, when they use an absurd pair like British pound to USD, that narrative inevitably gets challenged by someone who's like, look, British pound and USD like is one of the most liquid Forex pairs in existence. How the hell would XRP be more liquid than that? Like, that's inconceivable. And they're like, then they back away from that and they're like, well, look, there are very illiquid pairs that XRP would be good for, like, for example, British pound to, I don't know, Uzbeki, whatever ruble they use over there, right? Like some kind of very small developing country currency. And it's like, yeah, but those are illiquid because no one does those currency pairs. Like, those are illiquid for a reason. So who's going to consume the liquidity that you are somehow providing? It doesn't make any sense. And how would XRP accrue value from that? So I think that they are one of the most absurd. And the other thing that you can add to their absurdity is the size of their community. Like, I do think there's a non-negligible size of.
I can't tell if they're real or not.
Well, so you would think that they're not real because of their presence on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
But I've met some in real life,
Okay.
and I know some through like a friend of a friend,
Mm-hmm.
and there is like a real retail market for XRP, which has been promoted by Ripple, and I think that it's absurd also that Ripple tries to frame itself as like, oh no, we're for like banks and institutions, and then all of the buyers of XRP are retail investors.
Right.
It's like, wait, why does a retail investor need to have like Swift tokens in their investment portfolio? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and the banks that are purportedly part of their consortium have come out and said we'll probably never touch the token.
It's a total scam. And then they hire Bill Clinton, who's a rapist,
Yes.
to attend their conference.
A rapist and a statist.
And a statist. But in this era of Me Too, I would think that that's kind of tone deaf to invite Bill Clinton to your conference.
Hey, whatever pumps the bags,
It didn't even pump the bags, though. Like, I don't know what that accomplished at all.
Yeah.
He didn't even really talk about Ripple at all. And I'm sure he got paid like $250,000 to be there. So
I bet
maybe
more
he
than
could
that.
at least be like, if you support Hillary Clinton, then maybe you should buy some XRP. Like, do a little infomercial like thing like that. But
At least get a paid shill.
yeah, exactly. Use my Big Macs referral.
From the president who brought you Graham Leach Bliley.
Yeah,
Now bringing you this shitcoin.
I wish I could do a better Bill Clinton imitation. I should practice that, right? So that, and then they had Ben Bernanke come to the previous conference. So they hired Ben Lawsky to be on their board of directors, I think.
Talk about a conflict of interest there. Hey, let me draft a bill that makes it exceedingly hard for people to start businesses that pertain to Bitcoin in New York, and then hey, I'm going to go lobby on behalf of some of these companies trying to get through my lofty regulations.
Well, there's that, and I also think that they have a relationship with like a former SEC commissioner, so they're trying to get out of the whole ICO trouble.
Oh, I thought you meant chair. I thought you meant
No, not a chair.
I thought you meant Greenspan or Yellen.
No,
Volker's still kicking too.
No, well,
Yeah.
there is a former chair of the SEC who has done Bitcoin-related stuff.
And you're talking about the SEC, not the Fed. I'm way off right now.
Yeah. But this SEC commissioner in particular is like helping XRP as a legal counsel or something. And yeah, they just don't want it to be recognized as equity because XRP is supposed to not be equity, but it kind of looks like equity.
A lot of these shitcoins do, I would argue.
Yeah, highly centralized projects that advertise themselves otherwise.
Well, let's jump into the little tangent that we almost went on earlier. Your call out of multi-coinism and the initial distribution of coins. Why is Bitcoin's fair, and why do you think you caught out Ethereum specifically in this thread for being somewhat less ethical of a distribution?
Yeah, so just to like kind of frame it, I think that we're talking about ethics and morality and what people should do, ought to do, concepts of fairness. And these are very subjective issues, right? And I don't mean that as in like, hey, look, it's okay to stone someone to death if that's part of your culture. Like, I just mean that different people have different points of views on it. And even though I think that my point of view is correct, I admit that other people have different points of views. And thus, for example, people are like, oh, well, if it's unethical, why does it have a positive market price? It's like, all right, well, I mean, I think it's unethical to do something like sell. I'm trying to think of a good example. Well, trying to think of an example that everyone would agree is perhaps dubious.
Selling crack to a pregnant woman?
Well, yeah, selling crack to a pregnant woman would probably fall under the banner of unethical. Or like, and this spills over into the Me Too stuff of like, hey, this producer asked for sexual favors in order to have you in your movie. Like, to me, that's unethical. Maybe it's illegal in some jurisdictions, but not all. And it seems to like have been at some point in many industries a too frequent of an
practice.
Event, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, I recognize that I think it's unethical, and I recognize that there's a market of it that's happening, right? And so people are paying for things that are unethical, whether it's monetarily or by getting a gig or whatever. And frankly, it's also things like if you are running a company and you get a job for your niece or nephew, right? Like there are situations where that would arguably be unethical, even though it's not illegal and you're not doing anything wrong per se. It's just that you kind of cheated the system a little bit of some people's notions of fairness.
That's how a lot of people get jobs.
Yeah. And so it's like I think that there's different views on that. So and it's not like anyone thinks that one view should be legal or illegal. Anyway, I'm saying all of this to say that the ethics of the creation of money is also an area where there are differing points of view, and a lot of it is legal and some of it is illegal. But my point of view is that any kind of creation of money where you are not going to be you're not going to have anyone compete with you for that creation of money, and thus the marginal return from creating new money doesn't converge to a market rate of return that you would get from other employments of capital, then you have created a monopolistic privilege that is at least unethical in my book, possibly should be like illegal or violates the non-aggression principle, that libertarians view as the litmus test for whether, it should be punishable, right? And so specifically what I mean is that like in Bitcoin, anyone can mine and create new Bitcoins. And as we were discussing earlier, like if that means that there's an open market, a commoditized market for SHA-256 squared hash power and the consumption of electricity and ASICs and all of this, then a miner is not going to earn extraordinary returns. And I mean like that literally like extraordinary
billionaires
returns.
Were made.
Yeah, like maybe the benchmark isn't, the bond market of 3% per year return. Maybe the benchmark is returns from owning Bitcoins outright, physical Bitcoins. Like you have to ask yourself, like, is it more profitable to mine Bitcoins or to buy them today? Right? Like that's a calculation that you do getting into the mining business.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, all this to say is that I don't think that Bitcoin's creation of money is seigniorage, and I don't think it's unethical production of money.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's a very thorough explanation. And
I can contrast that with other projects.
Yeah, contrast it with Ethereum, the one you were calling out specifically today.
Let's contrast it with the diametric opposite, which is XRP.
You're on a Ripple tear today.
Yeah, well, I find it, Ripple has like a...
I'm not as threatened by Ripple. I'd rather talk about Ethereum. And I'm not really threatened
but
by...
I do it for analytical purposes, not for because I have a grudge against them.
Okay.
Because I'm trying to show the opposite, because I think that Ethereum is between XRP and Bitcoin in this regard.
Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about XRP.
So they insta-mined all the XRP on day 0.
100 billion.
Yeah. And allocated themselves a certain percentage of that, and like have sold, some along the way.
You got to keep the mic like you.
Yeah.
We got Justin Moon had the same problem too. He was like all over talking like this.
That's fair. Yeah, I like to use my hands and express myself, and I also think that I yell too much, so I feel like the mic could be on the other side of the room and would be okay.
No, I think you're good with these mics too. These mics are you have to get right into them.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
They created XRP out of thin air. So they had a monopoly on the creation of XRP, right? It's not like anyone can come in and be like, "Oh no, I'm going to be creating XRP on this same ledger," right? And this obviously they can come in and be like Stellar and create a new ledger, but on the same ledger is kind of the key. There is, are you giving yourself a monopoly privilege on this ledger? It's not illegal to do that. I'm just saying that I think it's unethical because you are essentially creating a very centralized distribution structure, and there's attendant problems to that. But it's also just like unethical prima facie because you're giving yourself a privilege and holding yourself as being more important than other people.
Yeah, I would agree. It's Instamine 100 billion, kept about 70 to 80% of the supply, I believe.
Yeah.
I've since sold some off. One of their founders, Jeb McCaleb, went and started Stellar, as you mentioned. On to the next scam for some of them. Ripple in particular, like I said, I'm not really worried about it. I think it's a very stupid and obviously stupid project for reasons you just laid out for us. But it is, I think these ethical boundaries are important to set. And I think we wholeheartedly agree with the ethics of the scenerage. And I think that's why I think you're touching on a underlying sort of thing that drives my hatred, not hatred, I shouldn't say hatred, but drives my disdain for like altcoin projects. I think it is unethical to a certain extent. That's my little spiel.
Yeah, because one of the counter arguments is always someone saying, well, look, the developers deserve to be compensated for the time that they put into developing the software. And I would really push back on that strongly because in my mind, like, someone who creates something that's like a good or service for the marketplace that other people find valuable, and other people are willing to pay for, like, receives money. I don't know that they deserved that money or not. Like, there's no straight line in my book between you did work, thus you deserve money, or even you got paid, thus you deserved that money. Like, it's not clear to me that you received that money. I'll grant you that. I don't know right off the bat if you deserved it or not. Like, that's a very different question.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you have things like Zcash with like a 25% of their block reward for the first 2 years goes straight to their development fund. It's like, do you really need that? I mean, Bitcoin's gotten this far without a development fund.
So and I almost feel like that's a separate question in terms of governance because it's like, all right,
the big G word.
Yeah, the big G word. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that I don't think that a coin having unethical seigniorage is a crippling death knell for that coin. And I don't think that it's like the reason that coin is going to fail is because they have an unfair distribution or they are engaging in unethical money production. I don't think that at all. I think that, like, perhaps long term, some of the most successful coins will be ones that even its proponents admit was like deeply unfair, right? And so I don't see that as like a disqualifier. What I see it is like, me subjectively, like I think it's unethical, and I don't see any reason why I should participate. Like, I already have a fantastic system called Bitcoin that I can participate in and have no ethical qualms about. Now, other people have ethical qualms about Bitcoin, right? They think that, for example, the energy consumption is contributing to boiling the oceans.
We had a big mainstream media onslaught with the boiling the oceans FUD today.
Look, the oceans are boiling, and every time the price goes up, we see more evaporation, and arguably that's a bad thing, right? Like, but so they have environmental concerns, or they think that like Bitcoin's distribution is unfair, and that any money creation at all that's not governed by a nation-state democratic process is unfair. And they see this as like a giant multi-level marketing Ponzi scheme. And like, I think that's Preston Barron's point of view on Bitcoin. And thus, I don't want to speak to his point of view more because I don't know more about it. But someone could decide to not participate based on either their environmental or distribution concerns, and that's fine. Like, and so like I would analogize that to why I choose not to participate in, like, even for short-term trading. Even like I already had a spiel about how I find short-term trading to be disreputable, but I wouldn't participate in like buying XRP or buying Ethereum. I was going to say equity in Ethereum, but
a little Freudian slip.
Call it Ethereum to not troll too much. And so, like, Ethereum, they had their pre-sale that was an exclusive monopoly held by the Ethereum Foundation, and they took in hard currency called Bitcoin in exchange for
18 million worth.
Yeah, which today is like
peanuts. It's nothing.
Come get your peanuts, $5. And so that's now it's like people are raising 200 million, 1 billion, 3 billion. I don't. How much did the US do? Like,
apparently 5 billion. But somebody actually, I just got to dive into this article. I have it on my open tab. Somebody dove into the analytics of the crowd sale, which went on for a year, had many different tranches, and they're pretty confident that there are funds being laundered and recycled and through that crowd sale in particular.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? Like, that someone made a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, EOS, same thing. Like, I highly unethical seigniorage. And the other thing too, like, if someone is involved with an ICO project, like, I don't want to be associated with them. It's not even that, like, I think that they're going to go to jail. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It's like, look, there's lots of people I can hang out with that have never been associated with any ICOs at all. And on top of that, I don't have the time to see all the people who I respect and have not been associated with ICOs. So why would I ever associate with you or, like, go grab dinner with you? Like, that's absurd.
Yeah. Not the type of people I want to associate with either. Try to keep the ICOers off the show.
Yeah.
Had a couple.
And it's funny, I started a meetup here in New York called NYC Bitcoiners.
I'm sorry I haven't made it to the first two yet.
No, that's fine. There's another one.
Next weekend?
Next week.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be able to make it.
Well, that's where I have to step up. That's why I am the co-organizer.
Yes. So I tapped Marty on the shoulder to be the co-organizer so that when I'm out of town. Now, I won't be out of town. I just I need to see if I can line up the babysitting with the grandparents.
It's a great problem to have. And it's great that your in-laws are close to watch the baby. That's why, like, we might move back to Philly just for that reason.
It's
alone.
a blessing. It's definitely a blessing.
Yeah. Not that I have any kids on the way yet. It's definitely in the conversation.
Yeah. We can have that offline.
Do you recommend it? I'm not going to make you talk about your son.
Yeah. No. I highly recommend becoming a parent. Assuming that you find a partner who is really, fits you really well and you see yourself staying with for the next 50 to 60 years the other thing too is, like, maybe we're going to live a lot longer than that. So maybe it's getting only more important that you find the right partner, because do you want to be getting divorced when you're 170 years old?
Probably not.
I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be like.
We're going to have to make like McCall's and find a lover forever.
Yeah, lower your time preference way more than you would if you were going to live till 80.
Pierre, they say the first person to ever live to be 200 has already been born.
Wow, that's deep.
That's deep. And they're already walking around on this earth, so
yeah,
could be us. Could be you.
And then it's going to be weird to, like, meet your great grandchildren, right? Like, that's going to be... And there's going to be like 100, plus of them, like, optimistically, if everything works out well, right? and that would be just. I can imagine like the business of doing massive family parties is going to be thriving.
Wow, talk about a get it on the ground floor investment. Any ideas around that particular idea alone? Could be a good time to start that business.
I got lots of great multi-century business ideas. So
Are Dyson spheres involved?
well, if we want to get cosmic, right? Like, so something that I think everyone should be doing is buying land that is about like 2 hours outside of major metropolitan areas. I think that on a relative basis, those plots of land are going to go up in value due to driverless cars. You'll have people commuting into work, and they'll be working while commuting. So then, like, meetings will be from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. and then they would be commuting back and working.
I really like that.
Yeah,
I like that theory.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, and then
I
the
really
other
like that
thing
theory.
too, the other ground floor investment to get into is autonomous RVs. So build us like, a very high-end multi-million-dollar RV that you can rent by the day, and you can, go across the country with your kids on an adventure where you can be working while you're driving too, or while you're not driving. Yeah, I think that's the future is nomadic lifestyles.
I like that a lot. Also, if you can get like access to options on black market organ transactions, if autonomous vehicles do become a thing and a reality, there's going to be a big shortage of organ donations because a lot of what drives those is car accidents.
That's true, though. I mean, not to get too morbid, but there will be situations where your driverless vehicle gets hijacked by a crypto locker type virus, instead of encrypting your hard drive, it will lock the doors and drive you to a underground hospital that will extract your organs while you're still alive. So I don't think that that's going away completely. It's not to be too morbid, because hopefully maybe they'll ransom you. They're like, all right, we're about to extract your left kidney.
How much is it worth?
Or you can pay us 50 Satoshis.
Ooh, that's a bargain.
Well, at this point,
yes.
No, it's not actually. It's
Yeah.
very expensive. So
I just doxed myself.
you better not be a no coiner. No, that's a very dystopian vision. Believe me, we're gonna have driverless vehicles that are not getting hacked like that. We're gonna have the best cybersecurity.
The best, the greatest. That was a funny little tangent there. It is crazy to think about those thought experiments, though. Like if the Hyperloop or like autonomous vehicles become like huge.
I've been thinking about this.
Like
while
I would
walking
commute
the
here.
streets of
I would commute
Manhattan.
here from Philly. Like I want to move to Philly, but there's just too much going on in New York City.
What I want to see is driverless electric cars going into Elon Musk tunnel system. And so in Manhattan, basically, what we would do is we would take all the streets and we would strip them and plant a massive garden. And so every single area where there was a street before in Manhattan would have the equivalent of Central Park. And then all of the driverless cars would be driving underground in these massive tunnel system with elevators up to garages that, and then basically you would have valet service without valets, and it would be less expensive than the subway probably to be transported on the system. That's my vision for the future of New York.
Would there be roaming cattle at all in this new grassland?
I don't know about roaming cattle, because roaming cattle could trample small domesticated animals as well as human beings, so we wouldn't want that liability. But we could have maybe sheep or maybe genetically modified miniature cattle.
I like the sound of this.
That have been tamed, so they would be very
Just straight veal?
Now,
just the veal market?
How would we stop people from hunting these down? Maybe if we have enough of them coming off the supply chain, then we could outnumber the number of poachers.
This would be good revelation if that turned out to be true. But as we're finding out, it's nobody really wants to step up. That's why the poachers come in, and then people have to pay like $50,000 to go hunt wild animals in Africa.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I do think that so me personally, I will confess, I've never been hunting before,
Neither have I.
It is like a lifelong dream to go hunting. And I don't want to go to hunting where it's like, hey, we put this feeder for deer, and we're gonna wait for them to come, and we're gonna sit in this blind, and we're gonna like shoot it at 20 yards away. That to me is like the least interesting form of hunting.
You want to lay on a hill for hours just waiting for something to
first of all, be
pass
hiking
by.
for days.
Yes.
And then
with a Go antenna and nothing else. A Go antenna and a cell phone with no service.
If that, like also maybe like with a few buddies and some beers.
We should make this happen one day. I actually want to do this a lot too.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So that's one approach. Is kind of going really in the backwoods and trying to find like that one sheep that you're looking for. Not packing any food. You're fasting the entire time, and you gotta find something to eat. So that appeals to me. Or the diametric opposite, which is having an assault rifle and hanging out of a helicopter and shooting at wild pigs.
Boars.
Yes.
This happens in Texas, right?
Yeah, it happens all the time. It is like shooting fish in the barrel. It's also like a necessity because they're pests. Mm-hmm. And you're in a helicopter with an assault rifle.
It's pretty dope.
Yeah.
There's actually videos of Ted Nugent doing that if you want to look them up.
I might have seen them already. That maybe is where I got it from.
That is like a crazy way to go hunting, though. Actually, it's a problem in South Carolina too. I've got family down in South Carolina that have farms, and they actually just so happen to have a couple helicopters too. And I have seen them hunting for wild boar in South Carolina as well. And they are pests. They eat your crops and dig holes all throughout your land.
Now, maybe like when the federal government is strapped for cash due to running too high of deficits, as we described earlier, they'll have to sell some military assets, and we could use a real like assault helicopter to take on these wild boars with missiles and a Gatling gun and whatnot.
Don't we want to eat the meat though?
No. This is just for cleaning up.
Okay.
You have like coyotes that come and eat the meat and vultures.
Yeah, it's true.
It's not like you're not nuking the place and making it uninhabitable. You're accelerating nature's process.
Yeah, no, it is crazy how weird things like animals dropped into new landscapes can fuck up an ecosystem. Have you ever seen the infamous YouTube video, the wolves coming into Yellowstone, being like reintroduced to Yellowstone? They changed the physical landscape.
I think I have,
No, it is crazy.
So that's the other thing about the driverless RV. That way you can do not only every national park in the United States, but in Canada and in Mexico. And eventually what we'll have is a highway that goes across, Panama and into South America, so that we'll be able to have driverless RVs taking us throughout the American hemisphere.
That would be incredible. Imagine going from the Rockies to Patagonia. That would be awesome.
I wonder if you could create a cruise ship that is meant for RVs, and you like somehow strap them down, and they're integrated into the cruise ship, like where your cabin would be. And it's like an aircraft carrier, It's like
just dropping off RVs.
Yeah, and it's just traveling around wherever people's whims are, and you have nice restaurants, of course, and whatnot.
I want to pass on the cruise. Not a big cruise guy. I would hate to get stuck on a cruise.
My parents are violently anti-cruise because basically they're sailors. Their background is sailing. They've always lived around the ocean, and so for them, cruising is getting onto a sailboat with your immediate family and just sailing around the ocean. Like most normies would be appalled by the idea of
having to hang out with your family for that long.
Well, hanging out with your family for that long, being on a ship by yourself without any land in sight for extended periods of time is like terrifying for a lot of people. Because it's like, you're in. Maybe you have a satellite phone.
You've lost your attachment to reality potentially. You don't know. You don't know until you see that land again.
Yeah, you don't know.
You know who does this a lot? A good friend of ours, Bitcoin Sign Guy, big sailor as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should do a Bitcoin sailing cruise. Not like a cruise ship, but like a sailboat.
I'd be down.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I think Bitcoin Sign Guy can actually make that happen.
So my parents are against big motorized cruise boats with thousands of people because to them you should be on a sailboat, a little sailboat.
Yeah, I'm opposed to them because I just don't want to get a viral disease.
Yeah, there's that for sure. I've never been on one. I do find the idea appealing because I love the ocean but I also like creature comforts.
Creature comforts. Never heard that one before.
Like a bed with a memory foam mattress. I guess you could put that on a sailboat. Why not?
Yeah, you definitely could. You could build that in.
I think the problem in my case would be persuading my wife that this is an okay idea. She doesn't like getting on a sailboat on a lake, much less the ocean.
On a lake? Yeah. Yeah, you're going to have trouble there.
But you know what? I think that it would introduce a great opportunity just to hang out with the guys and to talk Bitcoin all day long. So
yeah, just move our conversations from Twitter into the ocean.
Yeah, exactly. In international waters. Not that we're doing anything at all that would require international waters, but hypothetically speaking.
We could do some high stakes gambling on the sea with Bitcoin.
Can you use? Is it copacetic to use BitMEX when you're in international waters, right? Because you can't use it when you're in the U.S. technically.
I think you might be good.
Maybe you need like an address abroad. So
just make sure you bring your GoTenna. Use Tor. Use a VPN. You'll be good. Just make sure you don't have a U.S. IP address.
Something that's going to be interesting that I think that people haven't really thought about enough yet is with Amazon, but really with any sort of physical delivery service. Thanks to quadcopter drone type things, they're going to be able to deliver packages at GPS coordinates rather than addresses. And so it'll be pretty trivial to be in international waters and not just like packages, but like you're seeing these quadcopters that you can fit a human into.
Are we creating a true seastead on the sea?
Yeah, it's going to become pretty trivial to have a de facto seastead. Like it's not going to be like an oil rig platform type setup right off the bat, but you could have like a few boats that are hooked up in the general same area and that are receiving shipments. They're paying with the Lightning Network to receive something from Amazon or whatever. It could be food, or it could be a laptop or anything in between. It
could be full nodes, anything,
Yeah.
No, I love these future tangents. It's
Well, I come on your podcast to do future tangents. Let's not kid ourselves. Like
the drones scare the shit out of me though. Because have you seen like Skydio, the one that can follow you as you're like running?
That's actually not what scares the shit out of me about drones.
What
scares the shit out of me? I built my own drone from parts.
Okay.
And what scares the shit out of me about drones is them falling out of the sky and giving you a very deep cut, because those motors are extremely powerful and they will gash you because the blades are sharp. And the more powerful the drone, the bigger the gash. So I would be afraid of like, and the hardware is very hard to do. Like creating a reliable hardware product is way more difficult than creating a reliable software product, because hardware today with like a drone is software plus hardware. So already you have all the problems associated with reliable software, and then you're layering on top of that the problems of unreliable hardware, the environment that you're operating in, like the salty sea air of your boat delivery system. Let's say the drone gets there and for whatever reason goes on the fritz and crashes onto your boat while you're sun tanning. What a terrible first world problem to be having, right? There you are enjoying your beer, and this drone was bringing you more beer, and it crashes into you. Like it's a disaster.
And it ruins your virility for the rest of your life.
It's a buzzkill.
Had a former coworker of mine, Handsome Hank, at Barstool Sports. He actually lost the tip of his finger with a drone. He was doing a drone shot and went to go catch it, and it cut off the tip of his finger.
So
it's a real danger.
I think the friendly drones are a bigger risk than enemy drones. Now, that said, I have another business idea. If anyone listening is interested in far-fetched business ideas,
I'm listening and I'm interested.
All right, so malicious drones that are. So basically, you're out on your boat, and Amazon is telling you about the drone that they're sending you, so you know to expect it, and you're not afraid of it, and you're not going to deploy countermeasures.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say an unidentified drone enters your airspace, and you do need to deploy countermeasures. I think that a good system that would have good value would be a platform that you can install. You can install any sort of gun on, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the ideal form of gun to install on your platform would be like a tactical shotgun. And basically, it would be motorized and be using your radar essentially to identify the unwanted drone entering your airspace, would target it, and then blast it out of the sky in an automated manner so that, it's like 4 a.m, this drone is coming to kill you or to steal your Trezor hardware wallet. Your automated defense system would blast it out of the sky.
I love the sound of that. And that seems like how the game theory is going to play out. If these malicious drones are enabled, if the use case is enabled, people are going to have to build these security systems.
Have you seen the videos of drones dropping bombs in Afghanistan? These are operated by terrorist groups who are completely outside of the law, and they're dropping legit bombs onto American and Afghan and Iraqi bases. And I think it's only a matter of time before we start seeing that happen with today, the random nut job is using an assault rifle as his most powerful weapon to kill innocent civilians. I don't want to give anyone ideas, but I could see in the future that being drones, and then it's we got to have ways of stopping them effectively. And so I hope that someone takes up my automated shotgun sentry gun seriously and does a demo for me. I'll fly the drone and you shoot it out of the sky. That'd be fun. Actually, this would be a good. This is another idea.
I love Pierre's ideas.
Yeah, so
we're saying this in jest, but this legit scares the shit out of me.
Well, yeah, no, it does as well. But I think that. Frankly, I think we've got enough good people who are not trying to bomb us that will be okay. And it's the same thing with when you're driving your car. Your car is a very dangerous weapon. We have seen people use cars as weapons to kill other people. We've deployed countermeasures with barriers that block cars. But when you're driving on the streets, you have oncoming traffic sometimes at 60, 70 miles per hour on a back road that. They could swerve into your lane stupidly, drunkenly, deliberately, and kill you. So, we're constantly trusting our fellow human to do the right thing in that regard.
That's a very good point. Cars are 2-ton weapons that they do cause some casualties.
I'm pretty optimistic. I think 99.99% of humans are they're in the game to improve their lot in life, not to suicide kill themselves into you or to for the fun of it, harm you or injure you. I think most people are just responding to incentives to improve their life.
I would agree. I like that. You just made me less scared than I was 45 seconds ago.
Yeah, that's fine. I usually charge for this kind of therapy, this cognitive behavioral therapy. I'll give you a free session, Marty.
We'll have to open up a lightning.
I'm trying to reduce your anxiety. No, okay, here's my other business idea, though. Maybe it'll increase your anxiety. So today, we were talking about hunting and hunting wild animals. Now, there's a certain subsect of of the Bitcoin cult that is vegan.
Yes, there is.
And it would be a bummer if we're oh guys, we're going hunting. Sorry, Matt Corral, you can't come because you're a vegan, right? That'd be a bummer because we want to Matt's a
want to be all inclusive,
interesting guy, and he's funny and smart, and we want to have him along for the ride. So we don't go hunt animals, we go hunt drones.
I like this.
Right. All right. So you got like multiple scenarios. I think the one interesting one would be like essentially you're trying to recreate a first person shooter, except that it's drones popping out of nowhere and you got to shoot them down with your shotgun or with your assault rifle or whatever it may be. Whether you're in the back of a Humvee being driven around with a 50 caliber machine gun and you're shooting down drones, or you're flying in a helicopter and drones are coming at you, and it's all pre-programmed, like Westworld style. And eventually it will be Westworld where like you think you're shooting it. So I don't know if people want to do that.
That's actually a tangent I want to go on.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are worried about like virtual reality and us getting stuck in virtual reality. I think it's going to be much more like Westworld where it's physical.
And I think it's awesome. Like I don't like the idea of wearing a virtual reality headset and doing stuff like that in virtual reality. I love the idea of doing it in the real world where it is simulated by robotics rather than by...
That's another question I have though. Like fucking Boston Dynamics. Why are they making all these robots in like human and animal form? Like shouldn't robots have more ergonomic forms?
It's been my general frustration also, like even with like Roombas. Like why is Roomba the same it was like years ago, right? To me, Roomba should have branched out by now to where basically it's like robot as a service and it comes to your house and you pay like $5 a month and it vacuums your house. And then also here's another business idea. Okay. Automated trash robots that go out into the streets and pick up all the trash in New York City. Like,
oh my God.
The sanitation department
it would
should
be
replaced.
So much better.
Yeah. By an army of robots that go out at 4 a.m. and when you wake up and go out in the street, it is literally spotless. Like there's not a piece of stuck gum to the pavement. It's all been power washed. It's all been cleaned up.
I mean, that's the way it is in Europe. If you go to like you're walking around streets of Spain, Sevilla at like 4 a.m. It's like it's all human driven, but they're cleaning at like 4 a.m. This should be done in New York City.
You can get it to a very deep cleaning detailed level by automating it at a very reasonable cost. And then you would have this in every city. And I think that's like the future of cities is that they're going to be very nice places to be.
Do we have the mental fortitude to get us to that scenario? I don't know if we do. I don't know. People are all focused on stupid shit.
So what I wanted to say is that everyone's focused on virtual reality. What they should be focused on is computer vision and using machine learning algorithms so that computers can see into the real world rather than us seeing into the computer world.
I really like that framing.
Yeah.
What do you think? Like, what's the difference between the two, and what are the perceived benefits of choosing one over the other?
Do we want to escape to a fake reality online, or do we want to improve our real reality by using robotics and software and electricity? And we have these like building blocks, and I think that like we're underutilizing them. So now I say that, and yet like we're at the cutting edge with autonomous vehicles using computer vision in order to navigate the streets. And so once we have that building block done and that's mature, then you can have things like automated trash pickup in the streets, right? Because you've already solved the moving people around, which is arguably like the lowest hanging fruit, but also like the most economically beneficial fruit because now you've dramatically reduced the cost of transportation for individuals.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a very natural progression. Let's hope it comes to fruition, especially the goddamn trash in New York City. It's so bad. It's disgusting. It stinks. Yeah. The city literally stinks, especially in the summer. That's why I go to South Jersey. I have to get away from the smell.
It does. And you can even take it to another level, right? Of like, why not have robots repairing the streets? Why not have robots repairing the...
Well, Pierre, we need Domino's to repair the streets for us now.
Yeah, exactly. Sidewalks, subway infrastructure, like all of this stuff could be dramatically upgraded on a continuous basis if all of these systems were essentially digitized and automated using a combination of robotics and software.
Yeah. Do you think we'll ever get there? Do you think we're getting there?
Yeah, we'll definitely get there for sure. I think that because we're already getting there with driverless cars.
Yeah.
And they're currently doing like a pilot project in like Tucson, Arizona or something where it's like Uber except it's driverless, right? So it's maturing. We'll get there. When, I don't know. It's kind of like asking like, hey, when's Bitcoin going to take over? Like sooner than you expect and later than you expect. That's how. I think that's the problem with like exponential curves. It's like you never.
They're hard to gauge.
Hard to like estimate where you are.
Yeah. Well, speaking of driving Bitcoin adoption and making Bitcoin ubiquitous, to get back on Bitcoin topic, I think what you're building with the Lightning plugin on Excel is a good step in making Bitcoin more ubiquitous. Let's jump into it. What are you building?
Yeah,
it seems fascinating.
So
I'm ignorant when it comes to Lightning Network. You said you were pretty ignorant recently as well.
Yeah,
but I've been able to build this
for sure. So just to put it into context, like to me, the Bitcoin network itself, and it's complicated because we use the word Bitcoin to refer to so many different things.
Yeah.
So we have like the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network. We have Bitcoin, the monetary unit. We have the Bitcoin consensus rules. We have Bitcoin light clients and Bitcoin full nodes. We have Bitcoin miners. We have like the Bitcoin system, broadly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll try to be more specific than just saying Bitcoin, but if I do, I hope people will deduce what part of Bitcoin I'm talking about. I wish we had different words for all of these different things like that. Like Satoshi should not have called, or I don't know that Satoshi even started calling the unit Bitcoin himself. I'd like to look at the.
How did it get the BTC ticker?
I think that, I don't know, but I think that Satoshi only in the source code refers to them as coins.
I'm not positive. You would know more than me with the complete Satoshi on your beautiful website.
Like, the variables are called like max coins.
Yeah.
And
yes, I actually do believe that as well.
I'd have to go digging around in GitHub to really confirm it, but definitely coins is a often used term for the UTXO set, basically, and or the unit of what an output has. And anyway, so we have this monetary system of Bitcoin that is like the money, and then we have the final settlement layer that's like on-chain Bitcoin. And that is globally broadcasted, globally verified by all of the nodes on the network, and they make sure that all those blocks and transactions are valid, and they make sure that the proof of work that miners are providing in order to provide transaction ordering is valid, and they define what Bitcoin is like as a network of nodes. Obviously I wrote that like governance article, and we can get into all the nuances of that, but I just want to set that aside to say, on top of this system, go ahead.
I was gonna say I do want to touch on that article.
Okay.
Yeah. After this.
Okay. So on top of the Bitcoin system, we have a new system, and this system is actually deeply anchored in the Bitcoin system, and I think that's like a misconception that people have about Lightning, is that they like separate it too much from Bitcoin because it has a different name. But ultimately, like Lightning transactions are anchored in real Bitcoin transactions that are recorded on the Bitcoin blockchain, and the Lightning Network relies on features of the underlying Bitcoin, the Lightning Network relies on Bitcoin features like check sequence verify, and like CLTV, and like locking up coins for a period of time from using the proof of work timestamping / proof of publication system that Bitcoin provides, and using the same unit of value as well, of Satoshis, of Bitcoins, of coins, as Satoshi would call it. So this layer 2 is fundamentally different from layer 1 because On layer 1, on-chain Bitcoin, you pay per piece of data that you use, per byte.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that like a payment of $20 worth of Bitcoin might take up as much, probably like all else equal, would take up as much space on the blockchain as a payment of $200 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would pay the same transaction fee. So that's how Lightning works. Or sorry, that's how Bitcoin on-chain works. And then, and the reason that is because the block size limit is limited.
Mm-hmm.
Or the block, sorry, let me be very precise. The block weight limit
Mm-hmm.
exists.
Yes.
And it's 4 million weight units. In the past, I've said 8 million, but that was just because I was brainwashed by Jeff Garzik to believe that SegWit 2x happened.
Off by 1.
Yeah.
So close.
I was off by 4 million. The weight limit is 4 million units. Anyways, practically speaking, that's like a 2 megabyte block every 10 minutes. And so we have to, the miner is essentially charged by how much a transaction is going to pay.
What did Satoshi say? It would be like 80 bytes for a block with no transactions or something like that at a base layer.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. That's an interesting question. If
Yeah.
you have an empty block, how big is it?
I think it was like 80 bytes. I don't know why I brought that up.
Yeah,
but
no, that's plausible. Yeah, it's a very compact system.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin's a very highly optimized system. I think that people don't give it enough credit in that regard.
I think people totally misconstrue Bitcoin as an inefficient system when it's very efficient in ways that people don't really realize.
Yeah, and they think it's inefficient because they're just like looking at the proof of work part. But like also like that's very efficient as well. Anyway, so where was I? I forget now.
I rudely interrupted you.
You pay per data on
Mm-hmm.
the on-chain network.
Yeah.
On the Bitcoin or on the Lightning network, you actually pay by the amount of value that you're transferring, because as you consume the resource you're consuming on the Lightning network is channel capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Due to the fact that you're routing payments through other people who are opening and closing channels to enable this routing. And so by consuming channel capacity, it's like consuming liquidity. So you're paying by the amount of value that you're transferring.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, like there's an equilibrium point between, all right, I'm sending $5 worth of Bitcoins, so I'm going to use Lightning, or I'm sending $200 million worth of Bitcoin, so I'm going to use on-chain.
Mm-hmm.
And between those two extremes, there's a midpoint that like might be very close to $5 or not. I'd have to do the math today, and that's obvious. That midpoint is, or that like median point sort of
fluctuates throughout time.
Yeah, and it's going to evolve as usage of on-chain and of Lightning evolves. But basically, that's the trade-off between the two systems, is that one, you're paying by the amount of value, which is Lightning, and on-chain Bitcoin, you're paying by the amount of data. And now, obviously, like to open a channel, you have to do on-chain. Mm-hmm. So, like, there's this very interesting, like, arbitrage equation and equilibrium equation between all of these different
trade-offs.
These trade-offs. And I think that these two systems, these two layers, are going to turn out to be very complementary in that regard.
I really like that.
Yeah,
figure out an arbing strategy for when people are going to choose.
When does
on-chain.
it make more sense to send on-chain versus off-chain? And so this is something that like sophisticated users of the Bitcoin network are going to want to familiarize themselves with. Mm-hmm. And these are the same people who were like, quick to adopt SegWit and who understand the importance of batching. And so they're looking for ways to optimize because, frankly, like we're with the next bull market, I think that we're going to forever have fee pressure, and we're forever going to have a mempool that has a backlog, and fees today are a nickel in US dollars, and frankly, like it can be even less. I've seen things go through that are a penny in US dollars. Mm-hmm. But blocks are almost full. So you're really like consuming the last marginal amount of low cost capacity on the Bitcoin network. And I think that with the next bull market, like blocks are always going to be full, and we're always going to have a mempool backlog, and that's just going to fundamentally change people's mindset, and it's going to incentivize usage of Lightning. Although, like, I would rather people be incentivized to use Lightning for good reasons rather than that
the fees are too high.
was too high. Yeah. But I think we'll have both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but that's what I'm most interested to see is the UX of Lightning adoption and how easy it is for people to make those trade-offs. Maybe they won't be made if the barrier to entry to the Lightning network for your typical user is too high from a technical perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So where we are at today is still very early, I think, in terms of the infrastructure that's being built on Lightning. So the protocol layer of Lightning. So we got to think. This is very like technical, but you have like the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network protocol,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the Lightning peer-to-peer network. So if you want to be on Lightning network today, generally you run a Bitcoin node that is on the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network, and that node is feeding data to your Lightning node, and your Lightning node is on the Lightning peer-to-peer network, and so it is receiving information from both your Bitcoin node and from other Lightning nodes on the Lightning network. And basically, everyone's using the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network as the source of final settlement and the way that you open channels in the Lightning network.
Yeah. No, go.
Oh, so that layer is reaching a certain level of maturity, right? So the Lightning network went on mainnet earlier this year, and yes, it's still possible to lose funds if you're a little reckless on mainnet with Lightning, but it has significantly solidified, and now really it's about creating tools, for example, for automatically opening and closing channels, so that you are maximizing the chance of your payment being routed correctly through the Lightning network. And that's actually one of the disadvantages of Lightning, is that if you want to send $5 from Pierre to Marty, there has to be either a channel that is directly connecting our two nodes, or a series of channels that have enough capacity to route our payment from me to you. And so that I think requires like a certain level of maturity on the network level of participants who are online 24/7 routing payments, opening and closing channels in a curated manner so that they're not unnecessarily tying up capital in unused channels, and also they're not missing opportunities to route payments because they didn't have a channel open. So like that aspect of it, that's where we're at, is that level of maturing. And then once it's really no issue where you open up a Lightning node and you're on your iOS device and you don't even know the channels exist because they are being opened and closed in the background for you to maximize the probability of successfully routing a payment. And frankly, like you could reach like 99.99% of payments getting routed through. Like I don't think that we'll have to settle for having a system that is unreliable. Like I think that the routing Lightning payments is going to become very reliable as the system evolves, even though it's unreliable today if you're not manually opening and closing the right channels.
Yeah, that's the thing today. You have to be very selective with who you connect with. And
Yeah.
so is this UX going to get better, like where you spin up a node and it'll just automatically, there'll be like a drop down bar like, hey, are you okay with connecting with these nodes? If yes, click, and then we'll
there's
connect
different, ideally you would be agnostic as to whether you're okay with connecting to a node or not. Like, it's just so this feature in LND is called autopilot, and basically like they created like the minimum viable product for this. So it's like it's been surprising to me that it has worked for me to route payments. Not 100% of the time, but well enough to where I actually was not manually managing channels. But eventually it'll be fine-tuned, whether it's like with machine learning or just like intelligent heuristics to route much more reliably. And then as the end user who's using like a mobile wallet, what you'll want to pay attention to is like, if I want to cash out and transfer my coins to my cold storage, that will require me to close channels.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to close them in an orderly manner because if you don't, then you're going to have to wait longer. So the metric that you're going to want to focus on as an end user who is desiring to cash out and to transfer your, and like I kind of see it as like that's a use case of like a merchant who's receiving a lot of Lightning payments and then wants to like
Pay the bills.
pay the bills, like send Bitcoins to an exchange or something.
Yeah.
And so they want to like close channels. There, you want to be connected to routing nodes that are online so that they can cooperatively close a channel so that, it's basically as fast as it would be sending a transfer on Bitcoin. Otherwise, your coins can be locked up to like weeks at a time. Because in the case of an uncooperative close where basically you're unilaterally closing the channel, and that's where like as an end user it would be frustrating if you had funds that were locked up because you got into an uncooperative close on a channel.
Yeah.
And figuring out the UX around that, like hopefully routing nodes are on 24/7 and it's always a cooperative close for end users. And so they don't really see a problem there, but
What's the incentive for somebody not to cooperate other than pure maliciousness?
There's no incentive for it it's like, your node crashed and then it was offline for a few days because like you didn't get around to turning it back on. Like,
yeah,
that's not a good scenario. So like ideally you would have routing nodes that are run as routing nodes because they are profitably, rewarding their operator.
Yeah, that makes sense. But these are like interesting hurdles that we have to overcome. But it's been amazingly incredible to me to see the pace of growth that has happened. Like Lightning Qual and I dropped a podcast last Tuesday. We talked about building proof of concepts of using Lightning Network to reward players in video games. Might not be the best use case, but somebody built a proof of concept within 24 hours.
I think it's a great use case. And I think that there's kind of two areas. Do you mind if we pause for a second?
No, go for it. El Baño? Okay. We're going to pause here for a minute. And we were talking about Lightning Koala's app. We were talking about Lightning Koala. Not like Koala, Lightning, the game concept in particular.
Right. So I think that there's going to be like applications that are uniquely enabled by Lightning and not uniquely enabled. Okay. So yes, that's going to be a category. And I would argue that like Satoshi's Place isn't really in that category in the sense that hypothetically you could have had people paying with a credit card.
Yes.
But I think that there are going to be applications where it's like, no, this is actually only possible on the Lightning Network. And I haven't seen that yet. I think it's possible. And it's just due to a lack of imagination, or I haven't heard about it yet or something. It hasn't been broadcasted. But something that's like, quote unquote, decentralized in the sense that it's Lightning native. Mm-hmm. It's not like a website you go to and pay for something with Lightning. But that aside, like I don't think that's like gonna drive Lightning adoption.
No.
But it's an interesting thing to think about. Then there are applications that are online goods and services where, you now you don't need to have like some crazy banking relationship or Stripe or some kind of like credit card stuff. It's like maybe you're selling digital assets because you are a video game designer. In Egypt, and you want to get hard currency, and getting paid in Lightning payments is better than Bitcoin for all the reasons that Lightning is better than Bitcoin. So that's one category, and then like the final one is just like buying your coffee at Starbucks. Like that's there's no.
It makes sense.
Huh?
It makes sense to use Lightning over the Bitcoin protocol for that.
Yeah, no, but like I just mean that the advantage with the scenario where people are online and it's permissionless is that they weren't able to use Visa,
Yeah.
But for coffee payments, it's like, all right, now it's really like, let's dig deep into why Lightning is a good use case here. And I actually think that it is a good use case for people who essentially got rich off of Bitcoin and now are spending Bitcoin day to day because it's more convenient than having to go on an exchange and sell it for fiat, and then you pay your credit card bill.
Yeah. No, it's actually an interesting. Yeah.
No, but that's like a very small demographic, and I wish I was in that demographic. But
well, how do you think Lightning plays into Bitcoin's monetization path? Because we're probably between collectible and store value right now. If we follow the Zabian,
I reject that path.
Do you?
I find it completely objectionable. Even though I'm not like I'm not on Twitter like trolling people like Nick Szabo or Vijay about it because I love them to death, and it's not even something I want to like really argue about because I don't think it's important at all in the grand scheme of things.
You think it's all encompassing at once?
Yeah, I do. I think that an asset acquires moneyness as a whole, like so. Store of value, unit of account, and medium of exchange are all evolving in lockstep simultaneously, and to single one out in particular is either an abuse of language, like it's like we're taking the word store of value in a meaning that I don't think is really true to the monetary economics of it. And the other thing too is that like you can't surgically separate one property of money from the other properties. I think that like those three properties are like, people touching the elephant, different people touching the elephant and saying it's a different animal. It's like a proverb or some stupid thing. But basically like, we're talking about a monetary good.
An all-encompassing, yeah.
Yeah. So let me be more clear about that. For example, it's like, oh, well, nobody is using Bitcoins as a unit of account today because it's not stable in value. And so like economic calculation, if you're running a lemonade stand is kind of absurd, because you bought your lemonade for some amount of Bitcoins and then you're selling it for a much fewer number of Bitcoins because the value of Bitcoins has gone up, and thus you're running a loss, even though it's like, wait, like this is like a strange situation that you're running a loss because you invested in lemonade instead of holding your Bitcoin. So I think the fallacy there is that like, okay, but you got to look at how do people who are into Bitcoin think about their unit of account. And so you'll have Bitcoiners who think about, oh, well, is trading altcoins profitable in terms of Bitcoins? And you'll have Bitcoiners who are like, oh, is mining Bitcoins profitable in terms of Bitcoins? And the other thing, too, is that you have Bitcoiners thinking about like, oh, well, is investing in the stock market more profitable than investing in Bitcoins? Like once Bitcoin becomes your benchmark, your standard of value, it really is
it's all encompassing.
It's your unit of account. Like that's because that's what a unit of account is it's your benchmark. And so in that regard, I think that there are people who increasingly, think that Bitcoin is going to outperform on a risk-adjusted basis like any other asset, and they want it to be, and not only that, but they anticipate that in the future it will be their day-to-day unit of account when they're like buying groceries. And so I think that you can have the discounted present value of their future unit of account usage count towards being a unit of account. And same thing with medium of exchange and store of value.
Yeah.
Like you can say like, all right, Bitcoin's not a store of value day to day because like the price might drop, or month to month the price is going to drop. But over 5 years, I consider it to be a store of value. So there's like different gradations of these.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think I agree mostly with you. And then honestly, I wrote about it last week in the newsletter. I'm a big proponent of the VJ Nick Szabo collectible store of value medium of exchange. unit of account. I think and I don't think we disagree on much. Maybe it's just like it's more applicable for one of the four definitions at certain points of time.
And it's funny because like this is the sort of argument that, for example, like when Safieddine and I it's like 2 a.m. in Dallas and we're like 7 drinks in and a steak in, and we're talking about like hyper Bitcoinization and stuff, and it's like. It's funny because people are like, oh, like Bitcoin's a cult, like they drink the Kool-Aid, they've got their HODL mantra. But if you go hang out with Bitcoin maximalists, quote unquote, hardcore Bitcoiners, and like you listen in on the conversation, you're like, wow, these guys actually like disagree with like what to an outsider would be like quibbling about details over like, is Bitcoin going to completely wipe out all fiat currencies or only most fiat currencies? Like that's the debate going on.
And there's strong schools of thought for each.
Is Bitcoin going to take over all monetary roles at the same time or one at a time? Is like the extent of the debate. It's like, so when people are like, oh, Bitcoin's an echo chamber and you guys are just like repeating the same shit to each other over and over, I'm like, you're not part of the same conversations I'm a part of, because there's no echoing going on in the Bitcoin chamber. There's a lot of back and forth over, what arguably are like minutia, but I think it's like interesting subject matter.
Yeah, we got people betting stakes on podcast about where the price is going to be in January. A lot of diverging thoughts on the future adoption rate of Bitcoin and price increase. And like, there's very bearish Bitcoin bulls right now, and a lot of people that vehemently disagree with them. So there is a diversity of school of thought within Bitcoin. We're not the crazy cultists as bad.
As crazy.
Yeah, we're not as crazy as people think.
The fact that we're betting stakes, right, like indicates that there's some kind of dietary issue going on, and thus indicative of a cult or at least a religion.
Should I spill the beans that you're staying over for chicken tonight?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know about spilling the beans, but chicken's fine.
The beans have been spilled.
Yeah.
The proverbial beans. I don't think there'll be any actual beans with the chicken.
Yeah. No, I mean, the only problem with chicken is that it's a little lean.
Yeah, I like the way the head of University of Michigan football coach, Jim Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh called the chicken a scared bird. It's not really good protein. You shouldn't be eating it.
That's funny. I was Adam Carolla on his podcast. He was talking about how he was at a steakhouse and someone ordered a chicken breast, and he was like, "I don't trust the guy who orders chicken breast at a steakhouse."
Neither do I. Or salmon at a steakhouse.
Or salmon. Yeah. I don't trust him. It's okay to order a filet mignon, like. Or something, a lean piece of meat like that. But the chicken,
to get into the scared bird territory, and the scared fish territory as well. It's questionable at a steakhouse. Speaking of scared birds, we got to put that bird in the oven soon. Let's talk about your Excel plugin. We haven't even got to it yet. What were you building last week, man?
Yeah. So, I was talking about the Lightning Network before we went on a series of wild tangents. But yeah, so if I was talking about how the Lightning Network is basically
excuse me, I have to interject right now. Just got a text message from my wife. We're getting steak now, not chicken.
Wow.
Big upgrade.
This is quite an honor. I shamed your wife into ordering. She overheard our conversation. Marty's apartment is tapped by his wife.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Hey, honey.
Well, like, I think, we can talk about surveillance society, but I think that we're going to see more and more cameras around.
Oh yeah, let's stick on the Excel plug. What did you build? Let's stick on that.
We'll talk about the cameras over steak.
Yeah.
But basically, the idea is that if the Lightning Network protocol is maturing, and it's reaching some level of stability where people are using it on mainnet, there should be a client that... So right now we have clients that either it's the command line interface and you're typing in things, which has its strengths, but people, especially quote-unquote non-engineer, non-technical people, are kind of not comfortable in.
You don't have to quote us on that. You just call us out for what we are.
Yeah, well, I mean, because like I don't like to frame it in the negative, right? I'd rather frame it in the positive of like business users or NPCs.
Pierre, you're gonna get us kicked off iTunes.
I know. Sorry. I was literally talking about video game NPCs. All right, we're talking about lightning in video games. No, but so they're not comfortable on the command line. They're being offered wallets that abstract away all the complexity and that are like mobile wallets where you don't even know that you're using Lightning. I wanted to have something in between where basically it exposes all of the internals of Lightning and of the Lightning Network, while also not being command line. It's a graphical user interface, and doing it in an environment that is familiar to a lot of business people, a lot of finance and accounting folks especially, but frankly, like across the business world, whether it's in marketing or sales or whatever, like people are used to using spreadsheet software and Microsoft Excel in particular. And so I created a Microsoft Excel plugin that comes bundled with a LND node inside of it. So if an LND node is not detected or you don't configure it to connect to a pre-existing LND node, it'll spin one up for you. And
is it doing this in like AWS or something, or
no, locally.
Locally, okay.
And basically, the same way that it would spin up a node if you're running a mobile wallet.
Okay.
And Lightning is meant to have a node on the wallet, and so it's not like Bitcoin where you have to have like a light wallet or some kind of a custodial wallet, a web wallet. It really they've made a point of making it so that basically you open a private channel or a number of private channels, and so you're not a routing node, and you can be offline for hours at a time, days at a time even, and not run a risk of loss of funds. This is like an embedded node, or you can connect to like, maybe you have a node, a persistent node that's on your BTC Pay server because you are running a merchant website that accepts Bitcoin, and then you can connect to it from Microsoft Excel and see all the payments you've received, and also make outbound payments or sweep the funds into the main chain or sweep the funds to an exchange to sell for dollars. And so this Lightning plugin is for people who are like what I call Lightning power users. Mm-hmm. Pun intended. I spent some time finding that pun.
But no, it is. So let's describe a power user. What is a Lightning power user, and what benefits can they be getting out of the plugin you're making now? Yeah, I mean, you just described the benefits, but how would they use it?
On one end of the spectrum, you have someone who saw Satoshi's place and thought it was cool, and he too wanted to draw something that is not male genitals, like something cool. And they don't have a Lightning wallet necessarily. They work in finance and marketing in some kind of business function where they use Excel all day and they have Windows running, and they don't want to go through the trouble of like creating a Bitcoin node to connect an LND node to over the command line in order to run some kind of either command line wallet software or a web interface or something like that. And they want to be on the desktop. They're not on mobile because it's hard to draw on Satoshi's place on mobile.
Yeah.
And so this is an easy way for them to run a Lightning node and to have an interface into their Lightning node. So then they can copy paste in a payment request from Satoshi's place and send Satoshi's to create the drawing. So that's kind of like the most boring user of this would use it as any other Lightning wallet. Now, someone who has been reading Mastering Bitcoin by Adriana Antonopoulos, who's been listening to Marty Bent's podcast, to the Node podcast, to all the great content producers out there, and they've been following us on Twitter, and they're into Bitcoin, but they don't really know how Lightning works, but they want to know how Lightning works.
Mm-hmm.
They want to see the nitty gritty details of Lightning. They don't want to see the consumer friendly abstracted away wallet. They're curious about like, they want to be one of the first adopters, and they want to like think about ways that they would use Lightning in a new way. And so that's kind of like another type of user. And then you have users who they've got an idea for a Lightning application that they want to build, and like Excel might be a good way for them to try to like experiment and prototype different things.
Yeah. No, it's Excel just from like being in finance is one of the most powerful tools, and to have Bitcoin via the Lightning Network sort of embedded in that tool is incredible, just from like concept, just from getting Bitcoin to the masses. Like, so that's what, I mean, you already described why you came up with the idea. Like how big of an impact do you think this could have? I don't want to say for Lightning adoption, but just for people trying to get more involved.
For Lightning adoption as well, because like this is the kind of person that, let's say the ETF gets approved, like they might just own the Bitcoin ETF, but they want to actually get their hands on something that's decentralized and being hyped up. And this would provide an outlet for them. And I think that like part of the problem for business users is that they see Bitcoin get hyped up, and the only way to get involved seems to be to become a developer of some kind. It's like, then they get onto the blockchain, not Bitcoin bandwagon, because they're like, oh, wait, this is a way I can contribute by like writing, stupid white papers or creating PowerPoint presentations about putting health records on the blockchain. And so if they had an outlet that was like an Excel plugin where they can muck around and like get absorbed by the technological fascination of something like Bitcoin and the blockchain, then maybe it reduces the amount of like weird blockchain stuff people get obsessed with.
We can only hope. Only hope.
That's actually, anyway, that was like a big tangent, because I actually don't think that's like the most valuable aspect of this. I think that there are a lot of people who have been following Bitcoin and who bought Bitcoins on Coinbase, and they feel like they missed out on the beginning of Bitcoin, and they feel like this is the beginning of another chapter in Bitcoin, and they want to like get involved. And
that's a good hook.
Yeah, the difficulty of getting involved with Lightning is that like it's like, all right, again, I'm not a developer. And the other thing too is like we don't know what people are going to come up with, and it's still very early days in Lightning. So I see this as a way of like, I'm giving you a tool that's a wagon that's going to let you go west.
I like that.
And it's like playing Oregon Trail. I'm setting you up, and it's going to be a fun adventure. And I don't know what's going to come. I don't know if you're going to die of cholera along the way, or you're going to drown as we try to ford a river. But we'll try to get to San Francisco.
No, I could see some very, like, it's a very strong base layer from which building blocks can be on. I have no idea if this is possible. People just create function in Excel sheets that every time your node interacts with the plugin and updates a cell, maybe another cell in another sheet does something automatically, which sends your Bitcoin maybe to cold storage automatically, or at a certain threshold you get 500,000 Satoshis. All right, send this to the main chain or something like that.
You could absolutely do that. I don't have them created yet, but I know that they're pretty trivial to create, user-defined functions.
Mm-hmm.
And you could even have someone creating VBA macros that are interacting with the Excel plugin. Because the Excel plugin I wrote is in C#, but end users would still be able to write VBA macros that would be able to interact with that. And then the other thing is that you have, because it's in C#, with it takes a little bit of programming skill, but not a huge amount. You could write a complementary Excel plugin. So this complementary Excel plugin might connect to like an API that has like real-time stats about sports, You know, and then but they charge you money to use the API. They charge you Lightning, Satoshis on Lightning, and then you converse with another API that takes sports bets, and you're sending them Lightning payments, and you're actually determining what sports bets to take by doing some analytics in your spreadsheet based on the data that you're paying for with Lightning, and then you're placing those bets, with Lightning on another service.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah, so I think that I want to see mashups like that because that's kind of the idea behind if this then that. I don't know if you've ever used that website, but combining APIs in a way that allows you to create a user-defined, useful tool.
Yeah, it's Zapier on crack. It sounds like Zapier is a great tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for building. Are you looking for help? Are you?
It's definitely
it's a pet project right now.
The prototype is working. There are a number of what I view as baseline features that need to be added before I release it publicly. And then there's plenty of bugs that I need to fix before embarrassing myself to the public and leaving a bad first impression. But it's getting ironed out, and I do have the time and bandwidth to. Well, I've made the time to work on this, frankly, because I'm very excited about it, and I want to continue building on it. What I want to do is actually have it be behind a paywall, and so to access the software itself, you got to become a member of a website that's behind a paywall. I don't know what the pricing is going to be. It's something like $20 a month. Sounds about right. If you want the source code because you're a developer and you want to contribute to it, that would be a free thing on GitHub, and you can compile it and run the plugin yourself. End users don't want to do that; they just want the binary. And frankly, end users are a negative externality in open source software because you would be doing Windows support for Lightning users for 30 years for free if I put it out as a binary for free. So I figure this is a good in between, and then have not just the software available behind a paywall, but also a community of people who are Lightning Power users and who are helping each other troubleshoot problems, coming up with creative ideas on how to use this software, and then also having access to me as the developer of the plugin to troubleshoot problems. And then the other thing that I think is missing for a lot of people who are getting onto Lightning and onboarding is a mainnet faucet. And so I want it to where if you download this plugin, you're online and you have $1 to spend on Lightning Network up front right away, so that you can get on Satoshi's Place and make that drawing you wanted to make without the friction of having to go to a Bitcoin exchange to buy Bitcoin. So I think that a nice perk would be access to a mainnet faucet where you can be up and running pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to subsidize paying users too.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, Pierre. A lot has changed since the first time we met in the studio.
Yeah.
You more optimistic, less optimistic? I think it's a stupid question to ask you, but
yeah, I mean, probably just less optimistic, just mathematically, because we're on the back side of the bubble, and it's always more price optimism on the upside of the bubble. But I mean, that's kind of short term, price talk.
I'm talking Bitcoin fundamentals.
Bitcoin fundamentals, way more optimistic because of Lightning. Troubled by the inflation bug that we had earlier this year.
Talk about it. Why are you troubled? Shot across the bow of reality?
Yeah, it could have been a really bad outcome if it had been exploited for a substantial period of time. And my hobby horse is Bitcoin's monetary policy. And I talk about how that monetary policy is enforced by a peer-to-peer network of nodes. Those nodes are running software. If that software has a bug in it that accidentally does not enforce the monetary policy, then we've got a big problem. The reality is that software is going to have bugs, but I've always been in the fortunate position of memeing about other software projects bugs and not my favorite ones bugs, but it's always good to be reminded that nothing's sacred, nothing's invincible.
Definitely. No, if that bug did anything, it was a nice call to action to get more eyes in the review and testing process.
Yep.
Which is imperative.
Absolutely. And so, like, today we have Chain Code Labs that is contributing a huge amount to Bitcoin development. And I think that there's room for, like, 20 more Chain Code Labs.
Right.
Like, I think it would be awesome to have multiple developers on every single square inch of the Bitcoin Core repository, so that not only is all the code being thoroughly reviewed by a number of very intelligent C++ developers, but also that the code is evolving in a direction of greater maturity and greater reliability and more features, and like a network that, for example, we had a SegWit upgrade to help with on-chain scaling. Like, we're going to need to continue to do optimizations going forward. Bitcoin base layer of on-chain transactions is not a finished product. And I think it's premature for people to be calling for, like, we need to stop working on Bitcoin and like freeze it. I think that's not a good idea.
No, it's ideal in the long run, but definitely not right now.
Well, like, for example, something like Schnorr. Like, in the long run, like, we're going to want to continue to upgrade, quote unquote, like the algorithms that we use in different parts of Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, it's kind of the transaction signature, or the output signature, but there'll be other things as well.
Yeah. If you want to check out what's going on in the Bitcoin development world, go on to BitcoinAcks. That's ACKS.org or .com.
.com. I got the .com on that because despite Bitcoin being a hot, keyword for domain names, Axe is a completely, random for them
suffix.
Yeah, set of letters. Even though, like, I think I should have paid more than $10 for it. That's .com.
This is another thing that Pierre's done the year since we last recorded. He built this website, BitcoinAxe.com. You can go and check out the development. And really what it does is help developers filter the most popular pull requests and see at a high level what's gotten the most attention.
And interest. Yeah. And I started on this before the inflation bug. Quite a few months ago, and because I already recognized that, like, there was kind of an issue in Bitcoin Core of, like, the difficulty of the review process and the contribution process, and the friction there, I think, was, like, reducing the number of contributions that we would otherwise have. And I have, like, a very strong web development background, so I kind of saw a niche website that I could create, which would be a layer on top of GitHub that takes the details that are inside of pull requests and surfaces them to a top level, so that a maintainer or someone who's looking for pull requests to review could more quickly identify candidate pull requests to focus on.
Yeah, and thank you for that as well. Actually, very helpful from the developers I've talked to who've used it. You say it could help with like 3% of efficiency when it could, or can create a 3% efficiency gain for these developers. I think you've estimated before.
So I think that it's ended up being more than that.
Okay.
To my surprise. But yeah, I mean, even if it's like, I think if it's like a 10% increase in productivity and there's 20 contributors, that means that I've added 2 contributors, right, from doing this. And maybe that's optimistic, but even if it's adding 1 contributor, like, these people have very specialized knowledge bases, and any amount of extra work we get out of them, it's like it sounds like I'm like their taskmaster, but really, I mean, they want to get more work done, right? Like, they want their pull requests to get merged in more quickly than they are.
Yeah, no, it's beneficial all around. We're above 2 hours here. It's been a pleasure. We always go long. The first one was 3 hours.
Hey, we can keep going, but I'm going to lose my voice at some point.
I think you're going to lose your voice, and we got to eat some steak.
Yeah, sounds good.
Is there a parting note you want to imbue on the freaks for this year anniversary of our first episode?
I think that, like, if you're listening to this podcast, it means that you're interested in Bitcoin beyond just buying it on Coinbase and sitting on it. So I would just encourage you to, like, not just listen to Marty Bent's podcast. also listen to the Noted podcast. But
Definitely.
Also, go read books, whether those books are about economics, like human action, like some Austrian economics, or on the other extreme, like computer science books about like C++ or about networks or about all sorts of these different topics that are relevant to Bitcoin, or books about Bitcoin, whether it's Bitcoin Standard or Mastering Bitcoin by Andreas Antonopoulos. Like dig deeper and keep scratching, because like this, I know firsthand that this is an onion that you can just keep peeling, and it's not like you're gonna read Mastering Bitcoin and you're gonna have mastered Bitcoin. I'm sorry, but like, that book has not only does it have inaccuracies in it that I grant that I should be spending time fixing them, but it also has things that it's simplified, and so just keep peeling the onion and learning more. And I think because the more you know about Bitcoin, the more you start to realize areas where you might be able to contribute to Bitcoin, even as a non-developer. So, for example, like maybe there's an aspect of Bitcoin that just isn't well explained. And a lot of people think like everything's already been explained, but we still have new pieces coming out, whether it's like Dan Held's pieces about Bitcoin's like origin story, that have like really interesting insights in them and are synthesizing existing information in new forms. Or like Nick Carter or Brendan Bernstein, like they've come out with content that is synthesizing things that already exist and combining it with new insights of theirs. And so like clearly there's more proselytizing, more analysis to be done. And yeah, that's it. That's what I would say is there's a lot to contribute to beyond the code, but including the code. So maybe learn how to program as well. Like go on Codecademy, learn some Python, and get started down that road. That's where I started 5 years ago. I started on Codecademy and just started learning how to do Python, and then learned how to do C++. And I've contributed very small cosmetic pull requests to Bitcoin Core.
How's that feel?
It feels very small and cosmetic, but really it feels fantastic.
Well, thank you for your contributions. And I would agree. Yeah, I would like to think what I'm doing here is one of those paths through which I can contribute to Bitcoin, because I'm not going to be writing any code anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that, and I enjoy doing this as well, of like giving a platform to others,
right,
who know more than I do. And like we've had like Alex Bosworth on the Noted podcast, and he now works at Lightning Labs. So I want to have him back on to talk about that. But like when he came on and he was talking about the Lightning Network, I had no clue what he was saying. I really didn't know what he was saying. And so like, if you go back and listen to that episode and you hear me like change the subject abruptly, it's because I had no clue what to like respond with, because I was like, well, that went over my head. I don't know how our audience is going to understand this. But now I want to go back. Now that I know a thing or two about Lightning, I want to go back and listen to it again.
Well, Alex, this is your calling card to get back on the Noted podcast, and also an open invite to TFTC. I think I've sent that to you already. I don't know if we've talked about it though. Pierre, it's always a pleasure.
So next year, Marty, when we do this again, I want it to be like we have a co-owned podcast studio of
I honestly would love that.
The Bitcoin Podcasters Union. That would be fun.
We should actually sidebar that. I've been thinking something. All right. So my better half is not the biggest fan of turning our studio apartment into a podcasting studio, but luckily she's not here right now.
Yeah, and I have to kick my wife out of our home office when I want to record a podcast. And so I think that she probably frowns upon that as well. And also like she would frown upon me like soundproofing the entire room, because I'll have fire trucks, fly down the streets of Brooklyn and ruin a recording. Yeah.
No, that's why I'm looking for other studios, because I have the JYZ going behind me at all times, like in the studio I'm in now. And it's like, we digress though. again, thank you for helping launch this podcast and all that you've done for Bitcoin, evangelizing it and building on top of it, helping people see the light.
It's been a huge pleasure. And the other thing is that, like, one of my cliche sayings is, like, life is as hard as you make it. And because, like, I see people making their lives, like, really hard around, and I don't have anyone in particular in mind, but the other thing too is, like, life is as much of a joy as you make it. Like,
Exactly.
if you find something that and people often say, like, oh, follow your passions. I'm like, no, like, become passionate about things that you're doing.
I like that.
Is kind of the opposite, like, sort of opposite, take. And yeah, so seeing Bitcoin grow and seeing my son grow, there's parallels to that. I do consider Bitcoin to be a distant, maybe, nephew of mine. Like, I'm not going to claim to be, like, a founding father of Bitcoin, but I'm because I'm a newbie compared to some people.
Well, we appreciate all you've done as a newbie. That's all we have this week, freaks. This is the end of our 7-day podcasting binge, recording binge. I'm happy to end it with you, Pierre. Peace and love, freaks.